Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Neutron Perspectives, and today we're going to be discussing episode 9 of The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Hall Monster / Hypno Birthday to You. So, how does Hall Monster go? Well, Jimmy's elementary school is in need of a new hall monitor. The one they had before is moving away to Greece, and so the position is open. Rather than having everyone, vote for a hall monitor or have someone volunteer, basically Miss Fowl just pulls a name from a hat, and, well, the name that gets picked is Jimmy Neutron, and Jimmy wants nothing to do with this job. He thinks it's degrading. He just sees it beneath him, wants nothing to do with it, and just wants to step away from it as much as possible. However, his father does encourage him to, take the job because, well, apparently when his dad was a kid, he was a hall monitor too, though he does warn Jimmy to be careful, that the badge comes with a certain veneer to it, and that there's a darkness to it, and that if you let the power go to your head, it will essentially corrupt you. However, even with this in mind, Jimmy does not want to do this job, and at one point he even goes to the principal, or the principal goes to him, and he does pretty much just say, I don't want this job, but the principal just kind of wears Jimmy down a little by saying, hey, you know that sciencey guy with the big hair that you look up to, Albert Einstein? He was a hall monitor. You could try and emulate him. And that does wear Jimmy down enough, but what clinches it is that, well, Jimmy being the hall monitor gets him a bit of respect. For example, Cindy and Libby try giving him shit, and he just, well, he manages to basically shoo them along. One of the school bully ends up knocking into him, and the instant he sees Jimmy's badge, he immediately starts acting nice, and the other kids in the school are just so scared of what Jimmy could do to them that they're steering clear of him and trying to stay orderly. As such, Jimmy begins reconsidering his position on the hall monitor job, and so that evening, when he gets back to his lab, he basically makes himself tools in order to best do the hall monitor job. A device that scans passes to make sure to see if they're fake or not, an helmet which can detect any infractions, minor or major. As such, the next day, Jimmy goes to school, and he's basically now in super cop mode, as he's on the job looking for any infractions anywhere and just trying to stay alert. Only problem is that the very thing his dad warned him not to do begins happening as Jimmy begins going mad with power, as even the most minor of infractions end up getting his ire. He gives people demerits for no reason. He gets Cindy in trouble because her pant legs are not the required length. He gets Carl in trouble because there's too many stickers on his lunchbox. He gets Sheen in trouble just for him carrying gum. He even steals Libby's music. Basically, he's getting pedantic about a bunch of rules that, honest to God, nobody would give a shit about, but they're technically against the rules, so he's going to get them in trouble. As such, as Jimmy is chewing out his friends, well, they all begin kind of coming together and saying, hey, I think Jimmy's going a little nuts with power here, and they think maybe they should go to the principal about this. However, Jimmy hears them colluding and possibly rioting, and he basically puts them all on lockdown, as he has Goddard throw a net over them, and they basically are jailed. Well, okay, jailed in air quotes there. They're put on detention, but their desks are, they have literal cells put over their desks. It's very, very nuts and just insane. Then ultimately, Carl and Sheen are able to get out of there by saying they need to go to the bathroom, and as such, it does allow them at least some free time away from Jimmy. However, they collude to try and, get the hell out of the school, but Jimmy spies on them via Goddard, and so while they're in the bathroom, he has Goddard basically flush them out of the bathroom. Quite literally, he floods the bathroom and they get swept outside. Thankfully, though, this is when the principal arrives and sees what Jimmy's been doing, and so once more, Carl and Sheen try to tell the principal that Jimmy's gone nuts, with Cindy and Libby coming to back it up because I guess they found a way to get out of their cells. We did see earlier that Cindy was making a key out of soap. Don't know where she got the soap, but hey, I'm not going to question it. And so they do tell the principal about it, and Jimmy just says he's been doing his job and he's going to and he prepares to throw these kids in chains, but the kids thankfully have a counter for this, because everywhere that Jimmy's gone that day, Goddard has followed him, and Goddard records everything. So they think that if they can get Goddard to show how Jimmy's been like all that day, then the principal will be able to back off. Of course, Jimmy thinks that this won't work, because he has to actually enable it, but he actually has to give a specific voice command in order for Goddard to play it back, only for him to actually say that voice command as he refers to it. And so, yeah, Goddard begins playing back all the things that Jimmy did during the day, including a bunch of stuff we didn't see, and yeah, it's clear he goes mad with power. And even when Jimmy actually sees all this, it finally gives him clarity as he realizes, oh, I'm a right bastard, aren't I? And what I love, too, is that moment his dad's words seem to echo, and you think that it's his dad, that it's him, Jimmy, remembering what his dad told him, but no, we look over, the camera cuts over to a window, and we see that Hugh is just there to remind Jimmy, don't go mad with power, it'll cost you all your friends. That's what happened to me. Anyway, bye. Oh no, I love that. As such, Jimmy realizes that he's basically gone off the deep end, and the principal reveals that when he said that Albert Einstein was a hall monitor, he actually meant his sister because she looks a lot like him. Okay. And as such, Jimmy decides that he's not worth it to be a hall monitor, and so he tries to resign. Emphasis on the word tries. Apparently, according to the school constitution, a hall monitor cannot resign. Once assigned, they get the job permanently unless they're fired for too many infractions, or just for any infractions, really. As such, Jimmy just begins breaking every single pedantic rule that he enforced that day, and so he does technically lose the job. And so by the time the episode ends, someone else is assigned to the hall monitor job, and that is Sheen. It does not go well for the kid. Not at all. But anyway, this leads us into Hypno Birthday to You. What's going on in this segment is that Jimmy wants to build a new device, something called a 4-dimensional hypercube. Basically, it's a small cube that's just supposed to have a basically extra-dimensional space in it. Think of it like the TARDIS, if the TARDIS wasn't a time machine and was just a luggage case, and the TARDIS was a lot and the exterior was a lot smaller. Point is, Jimmy wants to make it. The only problem is, he doesn't have the necessary chemicals and components in order to create a reaction to create a 4th-dimensional space. As such, he goes to Carl because Carl got a chemistry set for his birthday, and Jimmy wants to borrow some of the chemicals from it. Unfortunately, Carl's chemistry set is a very basic chemistry set, as it's basically just there to do, like, the most basic of science experiments. However, there is an ad in the chemistry set for a more deluxe edition, which is supposed to have every element known to man, from aluminum to zirconium, and as such, Jimmy thinks that he would be happy to have that. Only problem is, he doesn't have the money to get it, and, well, his birthday isn't for 3 months, so he doesn't exactly have the means to get this thing right off the bat. However, as Jimmy is lamenting this, and we see him as we cut to him, Carl and Sheen later flying in Jimmy's hovercraft, they mention how Jimmy apparently has access to a Hypno device. I'll get to that later. And he could possibly use that to, get his parents to get him the thing, and Jimmy actually thinks that's a good idea. And as such, he takes Carl and Sheen back to the lab, or I guess he does, and then they leave later. I don't know. Point is, we cut to the lab later, and we see the device that Carl was referring to. This is the Hypno beam. It's a device that, well, all you have to do is just input a vocal command, and when you point the Hypno beam at someone, it'll basically instill that command as a post-hypnotic suggestion that they'll begin unconsciously following. And again, this is one of those times where the continuity for the show is out of whack, as it's clear that this episode was supposed to be aired later on, because they mentioned the Hypno beam as if it's something we already know about, even though, to my knowledge, this is the first episode where we saw the Hypno beam, so what can you do? But either way, Jimmy programs the Hypno beam with the command of, "Tomorrow is Jimmy's birthday." And as such, he goes to his parents, who are just having some couple canoodling. It's adorable. And he hits them with a Hypno beam. And as such, for a second it doesn't look like it worked, but all it takes is for Hugh to reprimand Jimmy for pointing something at them before he says, "Well, you can get away with it because tomorrow's your birthday." And as such, things just seem to go well, as Jimmy's parents try and think of an excuse to go out and get Jimmy presents, with Jimmy obviously dropping a hint that he wants a deluxe chemistry set. And sure enough, when the next day comes around, Jimmy's parents have hosted an entire party for him. They've gotten a petting llama, a clown, a bunch of presents, cake, basically all the whole kit and caboodle for our kid's birthday. And of course, they do give Jimmy his chemistry set. As such, Jimmy thinks that this is perfect. Everything went off without a hitch. And while Cindy and Libby do come around and wonder why Jimmy didn't invite them over, well, they keep their mouths shut because they get cake and goodie bags. So hey, everything's all fine, and Jimmy got the chemicals he needed, and he is able to construct his 4-dimensional hypercube, which he puts on his nightstand as he thinks that everything worked out well. As that evening he goes to bed content that everything just seemed to be fine. Only when he wakes up the next day, his parents surprise him with another happy birthday. Yet, turns out the post-hypnotic suggestion that Jimmy put in the Hypno beam has now made them believe that every day after the current one is Jimmy's birthday. So, for the next few days, Jimmy basically has birthday set up. And while at first Jimmy does consider, undoing the hypnosis he put on his parents, well, he does think that maybe he could use a few more chemicals and test tubes and beakers, and so he decides to just kind of let this play out, especially since his parents are still going all out to get everything to make the parties go off without a hitch. So everyone's just having fun, all the kids are enjoying themselves, everybody just seems to be hunky-dory. 7 days later, the bit gets old. Literally, everyone is getting sick of the birthdays. Nobody can handle all the sweets, and even Jimmy is starting to get tired of all this shit. And basically, everyone's running out of presents they can give for Jimmy. As such, Jimmy is deciding that maybe it's a good idea to call this whole thing off. And as such, he decides to reprogram the Hypno beam to, wake his parents up and make them realize that tomorrow is not Jimmy's birthday. However, as he does this, he happens to pass by the clown, and every party the clown has been doing a different act. Well, after several parties, the clowns kind of run out of things to do, and so the clown basically looked to an amateur magic book, and one of the tricks is to take something from the audience and pretend to hit it with a hammer. Well, he forgot he didn't read the pretend part of that, as he sees Jimmy pass by with the Hypno beam, thinks, oh, that'll do, grabs it, and then starts smashing the thing. And he only stops and he realizes, oh, I have to put it under a handkerchief and pretend to hit it with a hammer. Does anyone have a hanky? And by the way, the clown is played by Ben Stein. I'm only mentioning that because it's great. I love him. Either way, Jimmy thinks that with the Hypno beam broken, he's basically fucked. He could easily repair it, but whatever. I'm not a boy genius. And as such, when the next day rolls around and Jimmy's parents once more try to surprise him with a happy birthday, Jimmy tries to tell them, maybe we could not have a party today. I'm a little tired. And Jimmy's parents are like, oh yeah, we can't have a party today because it's your 18th birthday. You're going to college. And basically Jimmy's like, what? And yeah, it turns out that Jimmy's parents want to just ship him off as he needs to go downstairs, as they're going to have a going away party downstairs where he gets shipped out to college. But because of all the massive debt that his parents accrued hosting all those parties, they need a new source of income. So they're going to rent out Jimmy's room to the clown, Mr. Wiggles or Mr. Giggles. I forget what it is. Point is, the clown's moving in, and so as such, the clown comes in and asks Jimmy if he can teach him how to make his hair look ridiculous, which is great. And so Jimmy has to come clean as he goes down to meet with his parents, and he tells them that it's not his 18th birthday, he's still a kid, and that he basically hypnotized them to thinking it was his birthday. Only for Jimmy's parents to yell out surprise and reveal that, yeah, they know it's not Jimmy's birthday. Basically, when the clown wound up smashing Jimmy's Hypno beam, it undid the post-hypnotic suggestion. And so Jimmy's parents woke up and realized, hey, Jimmy's birthday isn't at least for 3 months. And so to try and put the fear of God into Jimmy, they put this whole thing together to basically make him realize that that doing this was a very bad idea. And as such, Jimmy apologizes for doing what he did, and the clown even comes around and says to Jimmy that sometimes having parties can be nice, but my parents make it all worth it. And as such, Jimmy's parents are all like, well, thank you, Mr. Wiggles, that was really nice of you. You really have a heart of gold. Mr. Wiggles goes, thanks. Here's my bill, and he gives them the bill, and it's basically over $1,000, and Jimmy's parents end up passing out. As such, Jimmy tries to sneak away, only for Judy to tell Jimmy to not go anywhere because he still needs to have the matter of his punishment. As well, Jimmy's gonna be paying back that clown, and so the episode ends as we see Jimmy has basically been sent to do a job, basically work at these elementary schools, scrubbing floors during summer school. So yeah, I think it's rather appropriate. Also, Carl got chased by the llama that was hired for the parties. Okay. But anyway, what are my thoughts on these segments? Well, first, Hall Monster. I think it's an enjoyable segment. I admit it does move a little fast in the beginning, but overall, I do kind of find it fun. I love the idea of seeing Jimmy just go down the rabbit hole of being a hall monitor, and the power of the badge basically corrupts him, as he basically starts enforcing every little rule and just kind of goes overboard. And I find that to be enjoyable because it's the first time in a Jimmy Neutron episode where he is the conflict. And I don't mean that in the sense, and I don't mean that to say that he isn't involved with a conflict, because there have been plenty of episodes prior to this where Jimmy has had a hand in the central conflict. But the thing is, Jimmy has usually been just as much a victim of the conflict as everybody else. It's just that he usually sets something in motion, there are unintended consequences, and then he has to figure out a way to try and solve it. Or in some cases, his own stubbornness gets the better of him, and that's in his own way. But in this case, I like that the conflict is Jimmy himself. And so seeing Jimmy utilize the vast intelligence that has gotten him into and out of jams in previous episodes to basically be the antagonistic force for all the other characters, I like it. Yeah, okay, thematically it's kind of similar, as it is Jimmy's mess, Jimmy is the one that creates the mess, But again, what I like in this case is that he is the antagonistic force. He is the one propelling everything forward by basically calling all the students out on the most basic of rules that probably no one would care about. It's basically just the blue laws of the school, like the length of pants, because Cindy's worn the same outfit for several episodes and nobody's given a shit. Carl has walked around with Carl's most likely walked around with a lunchbox for so long and nobody's cared. And likewise, she wasn't even chewing the gum. And yet he still got in trouble. And Libby's whole thing is that she loves music. She's never been called out on it. So the fact that Jimmy is basically just enforcing all these rules that not even the previous hall monitor, who we saw at the beginning of the episode, and he was an ass too, didn't try enforcing, it kind of makes it clear that the power is getting to Jimmy's head. And so seeing him kind of go down that rabbit hole and seeing him become the antagonistic force, I like it. And it is nice that, and again, I kind of like seeing Jimmy go down that hole. While I do say that Jimmy is a good kid and likes to do the right thing, he's still a kid, and when it comes down to it, he is prone to making mistakes. If he wasn't prone to making mistakes, this whole series wouldn't be a thing at all. So seeing Jimmy basically kind of go down, seeing Jimmy basically get corrupted by power and even basically throw his friends in the metaphorical pokey, it's actually pretty entertaining to see, and it is kind of nice to see Jimmy reflect on it when all of his everything that he's been done is exposed to light, and he's like, oh damn, I'm a dick right now. And I like that. I just kind of like that. Plus, I kind of like the running gag in the episode where whenever a new hall monitor was selected, Carl wanted to be the hall monitor, and when Miss Fowl pulls out the name, she's like, Carl Weezer, like, I accept! And the only reason she's calling out his name is because his mom loves something embarrassing for him that she has to tell him about right there in front of class. Don't pull him aside after class. Has to be during class. I love it. So I do find that enjoyable, and it is kind of, and again, seeing Jimmy basically go nuts with power, it's nice. I like the personality. I like that. Overall, I think Hall Monster is an enjoyable episode just for seeing the conflict and how far it goes. So enjoyable. Then there's Hypno Birthday to You. I honestly do kind of like this segment. When I think about it, it feels like it should have grander ramifications because hypnosis ain't nothing to shake your tail at, because Jimmy basically utilizes hypnosis to try and trick his parents. But what lessens the blow for me is the fact that, one, as is normal with the Jimmy Neutron franchise, the problem is basically not a matter of active maliciousness. It's just Jimmy being a kid and not fully thinking through the consequences of his actions. And even if the hypno beam did exactly as it was supposed to, i.e., just give Jimmy one extra birthday and then everything goes back to normal. It's still something that I could see a kid actively rationalizing out, because how Jimmy got to the point where he was willing to use the hypno ray on his parents in order to get the deluxe science kit was like, well, my parents like seeing me happy, so hey, I'm just doing them a favor here. So, and again, that is just typical kid logic. And the fact that Jimmy keeps letting this thing go on when he does see the ramifications of having a birthday every day, it makes sense. It does feel like something a kid would do. It's dubious to say the least, but again, it's not really coming from maliciousness, it's coming from ignorance. And so seeing Jimmy basically have to deal with it over and over, and having to basically almost dealing with the potential ramifications of being stuck in this loop when the hypno beam is destroyed near the end of the episode, it is nice. Although again, I kind of would have. Oh, and again, I do like the moral for the episode. I like that by the end, it's Jimmy realizing that he can't just keep that. Maybe the whole idea, constantly having a day celebrating you may not be always fun. It's fun, and that it's always, and the love of your parents is definitely more preferable, which in some regards I think we've seen tackled before in the show. But honestly, what keeps me from enjoying the episode and not giving it the side eye even there, because again, what makes Jimmy realize this is a bad idea is because everyone's getting sick of it, is the ending of the episode. Because I like how Jimmy's parents react to it. as we've established, Jimmy's parents more than know how to deal with their son. They know all the shit he pulls. They prepare for the shit he pulls. Keep in mind that last week, when Jimmy snuck out to Retroland on a dare, his mom dressed up as the Phantom of Retroland just to put the fear of God into him because he dared to sneak out. So clearly Jimmy's parents can get creative in their parenting regime. So the fact that when the Hypno being got broken and they were undone and they realized what Jimmy had done, when they saw what Jimmy had done, and their response was, well, let's pretend that the egg is going. I like that. I actually like that. And for someone like Jimmy, I feel like such a response is needed. Because, yeah, while Jimmy does, in some regards, see himself as a little above his parents, he still defers to them. After all, they're his parents. He does love them, he does care about them, and they do plenty of stuff for him that he can't do for himself. And so having Jim, basically when one of Jimmy's inventions goes awry, or Jimmy uses his intelligence to supersede them, well, then creative solutions are in order. So to have them basically go, well, he's had a few birthdays already. What if we made him think that we think it's his 18th birthday and we're kicking him out? I think that's actually I think that's honestly a pretty good response to the situation, especially since they were not planning to kick him out. They just need to put the fear of God into him. Although I do like that they do offer more ramifications, because it costs them a lot of money to do all those parties, and so Jimmy basically has to work it off, which I think is a good compromise. I think that's a good way of basically making Jimmy realize that he fucked up, and this is the best way to make the lesson stick. So I like that. I do actually like that. Maybe the turning point with Jimmy realizing why this is a bad idea could have used a bit more work, but overall, it's not bad. But overall, I think the episode is fine. It's a creative idea. I like seeing Jimmy basically go operating on kid's logic under the whole thing, and that's what digs him even deeper. And I think the resolution is worth it. Maybe it does feel a bit more flawed, because again, when it comes to hypnosis, that one's a very dubious moral subject. But I think the ending is enough that make it worth it, because it is nice to see Jimmy at least get the justified ramifications for him basically screwing with his parents' psyche. And yes, his dad does openly say at one point that Jimmy had a dark hold over them. So yes, it was fucked up, and his parents know it was fucked up. So there you go. Otherwise, though, yeah, overall just a pair of enjoyable episodes. I think I liked Hall Monster more, though, as I enjoyed the conflict. So I enjoy the conflict and the story in that one more than the second half, than Hypno Birthday to You. But I think the finale for Hypno Birthday to You does make it more worth it. So, yeah, on the whole, just an enjoyable overall pair of fine episodes. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the video. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll hopefully see you next week. Take care.